The empire was unraveling faster than anyone could have imagined. 6 minutes into Emily's countdown, the once mighty machinery of control began to crumble like sandcastles washed away by an unstoppable tide. Planets on the outer edges of imperial space declared independence, their leaders stepping forward to denounce the empire's tyranny. In bustling cities and quiet villages alike, people took to the streets, shouting for change. Some carried signs, others wielded tools or weapons, ready to defend themselves if necessary. On the capital planet, the chaos in the amphitheater had spilled out into the surrounding city. Crowds surged through the streets, unsure whether to flee, fight, or simply wait for whatever came next. Soldiers stationed nearby struggled to maintain order, but without functioning equipment, they were little more than bystanders. Even General Marcus Hale seemed powerless, his usual confidence replaced by a growing sense of dread. Emily floated above the platform, her glowing presence steady and calm. She watched as the galaxy reacted to her words, each choice rippling outward like waves in a pond. Some embraced her message of unity, while others clung desperately to the old ways. The empire wasn't just falling, it was fracturing, splitting into countless pieces that would take years, perhaps decades, to rebuild. Far from the capital, Daniel Foster reached the Resistance headquarters, a hidden basement beneath an abandoned factory. The room buzzed with activity as members gathered around makeshift tables covered in maps and plans. When Daniel entered, he was met with skeptical stares. He wasn't a fighter. He was just a worker, someone who had spent most of his life building machines for the Empire. But when he spoke, his voice carried conviction. "We can't waste this chance," Daniel said, holding up his toolkit. "If the Empire is falling apart, we need to be ready to step in. We can help people. We can show them there's another way." His words struck a chord. Slowly, the Resistance members nodded, their resolve strengthening. They divided into teams, some heading out to distribute food and supplies, others preparing to sabotage key Imperial facilities before they could cause further harm. Daniel joined a group tasked with disabling communication hubs, knowing it might be the only way to stop the Empire from regrouping. Meanwhile, aboard the damaged cruiser, Rachel Bennett led a ragtag band of freed prisoners through narrow corridors. Their goal was simple: reach the command center and disable the ship's weapon systems. If they succeeded, they could prevent the cruiser from being used against civilians. But getting there wouldn't be easy. Automated defenses still functioned sporadically, forcing them to move cautiously. As they crept along, Rachel thought about Emily's message: unity, connection, words she hadn't dared to believe in until now. For years, she had fought alone, surviving one day at a time. But seeing others rise up, ordinary people choosing to stand together, gave her hope. Maybe the galaxy didn't have to stay broken forever. Back in the amphitheater, Marcus tried one last desperate attempt to regain control. He ordered his remaining loyalists to storm the platform and seize Emily, convinced that killing her would stop the anomaly. But as they approached, the air around her shimmered violently, throwing them backward. The ground beneath their feet cracked, sending shards of stone flying. It was clear. No weapon, no force, could touch her. "You're running out of time," Emily said softly, her gaze locking onto Marcus. "What will you choose?" Marcus hesitated, his mind racing. All his life, he had believed in strength, in dominance. But now, surrounded by failure and fear, he wondered if those beliefs had been wrong. Could he really let go of everything he had fought for? Or would he cling to the Empire until its final breath? Across the galaxy, similar questions echoed in the hearts of billions. Families huddled together, unsure what tomorrow would bring. Rebels clashed with loyalists, their battles fueled by anger and hope. And in the silence between moments of chaos, a new possibility began to emerge, one where humanity might finally find its place among the stars. 7 minutes down, 20 to go. The grand amphitheater buzzed with energy as millions of people tuned in to watch the live broadcast. It was a spectacle orchestrated by the Galactic Empire, designed to remind its citizens who held the power. The empire spanned thousands of star systems, and its rulers were masters at using fear to keep everyone in line. Today's event was no different, a public execution meant to crush any whispers of rebellion. At the center of it all stood Emily Carter, a young woman barely out of her teens. Her hands were bound behind her back, and she wore a simple gray tunic that hung loosely on her thin frame. Despite her predicament, there was an air of calm about her. She didn't struggle or beg for mercy like many before her had done. Instead, she stood tall, her dark eyes scanning the crowd with quiet defiance. The audience gathered around her was massive, filling every seat in the colossal arena. Above them, towering holographic screens displayed her face in vivid detail, so that even those seated far away could see her expression clearly. Beyond the physical spectators, billions more watched from their homes, offices and ships scattered across the galaxy. For the Empire, this wasn't just an execution, it was a performance, a demonstration of absolute authority. General Marcus Hale stood nearby, his polished uniform gleaming under the artificial lights. He was a man known for his ruthlessness, someone who believed that compassion was a weakness. His piercing blue eyes locked onto Emily, studying her carefully. There was something unsettling about her composure, something he couldn't quite place. Most prisoners broke down long before reaching the execution platform, but not her. She seemed almost serene. "Do you have anything to say?" Marcus asked, his voice amplified so everyone could hear. It was a formality, of course. Prisoners rarely spoke unless it was to plead for their lives. But Emily surprised him. She lifted her chin slightly, her gaze steady. "You think this will end me," she said softly, yet her words carried through the amphitheater, as if spoken directly into each person's ear. "But you're wrong." A murmur rippled through the crowd. No one expected her to speak, let alone challenge the general. Marcus frowned, unsure how to respond. Before he could say anything, Emily continued, her tone calm but firm. "What you've built here, your empire, your rules, they're hollow. You can't control everything, no matter how hard you try." Marcus clenched his jaw, annoyed by her audacity. He signaled to the guards standing beside her. "Enough," he snapped. "Proceed." The guards nodded and moved into position, raising the ceremonial energy blade meant to carry out the sentence. The crowd grew silent, anticipation hanging heavy in the air. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail for the billions watching live. This was the moment they'd been waiting for, the moment when the Empire would assert its dominance once again. But then something strange happened. As the blade descended toward Emily's neck, it stopped abruptly, hovering inches above her skin. Gasps erupted from the crowd as technicians scrambled to figure out what had gone wrong. The blade flickered, its glow dimming and brightening erratically. Emily didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled. A small, knowing smile that sent chills down Marcus's spine. Around her, the air began to shimmer, distorting the light like heat waves rising from hot pavement. A low hum filled the amphitheater, growing louder with each passing second. "What is this?" Marcus demanded, turning to his tech team. They frantically tapped at their consoles, but none of their systems responded. Whatever was happening, it was beyond their understanding. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the hum stopped. The crowd froze, their collective breath held as they waited for what would come next. Little did they know, this was only the beginning. The amphitheater fell eerily silent as the energy blade hovered motionless above Emily's neck. The crowd, moments ago roaring with approval, now sat frozen in confusion and unease. Even General Marcus Hale, usually unshakable, felt a chill run down his spine. He glanced at the guards, who stood frozen too, their faces pale with uncertainty. Whatever was happening defied logic, and the Empire prided itself on control through science and order. Emily didn't move. Her calm demeanor hadn't wavered since the beginning of the execution. But now, there was something else, a faint glow emanating from her skin. It wasn't harsh or blinding. Instead, It pulsed gently, like sunlight filtering through water. The shimmering air around her intensified, making her appear almost otherworldly. Some people in the audience began to whisper nervously, while others clutched their seats tightly, unsure whether to flee or stay. Marcus stepped forward, his boots clicking sharply against the polished floor. "What is this trickery?" he barked, his voice cutting through the growing tension. His hand instinctively went to the weapon holstered at his side, but when he tried to draw it, nothing happened. The gun refused to budge, as though an invisible force held it in place. For the first time in years, Marcus felt powerless. Emily finally spoke again, her voice soft yet clear enough for everyone to hear. "This isn't trickery," she said, tilting her head slightly to look directly at Marcus. "This is truth." Her words sent another ripple through the crowd. Truth. What did she mean? Marcus narrowed his eyes, trying to mask his unease. "You're just a prisoner," he spat, attempting to regain control of the situation. "A nobody. Don't think you can intimidate me." Emily's smile widened ever so slightly, but there was no malice in it, only pity. "I'm not trying to intimidate you," she replied. "But you've made a mistake. All of you have." She gestured vaguely toward the gathered audience, her bound hands moving gracefully despite her restraints. "You've built your empire on fear and greed, believing yourselves superior to everything else. But you're wrong." As she spoke, the hum returned, louder this time. It vibrated through the amphitheater, rattling loose objects and sending tremors through the ground beneath their feet. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some covering their ears as if trying to block out the sound. Others stared wide-eyed at Emily, unable to look away. Marcus turned to his technicians, shouting orders. "Shut it down. Whatever this is, shut it down." But his commands fell on deaf ears. The tech team worked frantically, pressing buttons and adjusting dials, but none of their efforts had any effect. The systems that powered the Empire's grand displays, and its brutal efficiency, were failing one by one. Then came the gravity shift. At first, it was subtle, small items floating upward, drifting lazily toward the ceiling. But soon, larger objects followed. Chairs, equipment, even people. Panic erupted as spectators scrambled to hold onto something solid, anything to keep themselves grounded. Screams filled the air as chaos consumed the once orderly arena. Through it all, Emily remained untouched. She floated gently above the platform, her feet no longer touching the ground. The glowing aura around her grew brighter, illuminating the terrified faces of those watching. Marcus stumbled backward, struggling to maintain his balance as the world around him unraveled. He wanted to shout, to demand answers, but his voice caught in his throat. Deep down, he knew this was beyond his understanding or his control. Finally, Emily raised her hands, and the chaos stopped. Objects froze mid-air, suspended as though time itself had paused. The hum faded into silence, leaving only the sound of labored breathing and pounding hearts. Every eye in the amphitheater, and across the galaxy, through the live broadcast, was fixed on her. "This is your chance," she said, her voice resonating deeply, as if coming from everywhere at once. "Choose wisely." No one dared to move. No one dared to speak. Whatever Emily Carter was, whatever power she wielded, it was clear that the Galactic Empire's days of dominance were numbered. The silence that followed Emily's words was deafening. Every person in the amphitheater, and millions more watching from their homes or ships, felt the weight of her statement. "This is your chance," she had said, her voice echoing, as though it came from the depths of space itself. But what did she mean? What choice was she offering? And why did it feel like the fate of the galaxy rested on their response? Emily floated above the platform, her glowing form casting soft light over the terrified crowd. The objects suspended in mid-air hung motionless, defying gravity as if waiting for her next command. Her calm expression gave no hint of malice, yet there was an undeniable power radiating from her, a force that made even General Marcus Hale take a step back. Marcus tried to steady himself, his mind racing. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to focus. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be real. Yet here it was, unfolding right before his eyes. He glanced at his soldiers, who stood frozen in place, their weapons useless. His empire, the empire he had sworn to protect, was unraveling faster than he could comprehend. "What are you?" Marcus demanded, his voice trembling despite his effort to sound authoritative. Emily turned her gaze toward him, her dark eyes piercing through his bravado. "I am what happens when balance is disrupted," she replied simply. "Your empire has taken too much, destroyed too much, controlled too much. You've forgotten that life isn't meant to be ruled. It's meant to be shared." Her words struck a chord with some in the audience. A young woman sitting near the front clutched her chest, tears streaming down her face. She thought of her brother, conscripted into the Imperial Army and never seen again. An older man nearby lowered his head, remembering the family farm seized by Imperial decree. For years, they had accepted these losses as inevitable, but now doubt crept into their minds. Was this really how things were supposed to be? Others weren't so quick to question. Many in the crowd shouted protests, calling Emily a liar and demanding she release them from whatever strange hold she had over the arena. Some even cheered for Marcus, urging him to act. But the general stood immobilized, unable to muster a response. His usual confidence had crumbled under the sheer impossibility of the situation. Far away, beyond the capital planet, scientists monitoring cosmic phenomena noticed something extraordinary. Instruments designed to detect gravitational waves and energy surges recorded readings unlike anything they'd ever seen. A massive spike emanated from the Empire's central world, spreading outward like ripples in a pond. They called it the anomaly, though none could explain its source or its purpose. Back in the amphitheater, Emily addressed the crowd once more. "You have 27 minutes, she announced, her tone firm but not unkind. "That's how long it will take for everything you've built to collapse. Cities will fall, fleets will vanish, and your empire will cease to exist. But it doesn't have to end this way." Murmurs spread through the audience. Some dismissed her warning as nonsense, convinced the empire was too powerful to fail. Others whispered among themselves, debating whether she might actually be telling the truth. Could the empire truly fall in less than half an hour? The idea seemed absurd, yet the evidence was undeniable. The floating objects, the malfunctioning technology, the eerie stillness in the air. Marcus finally found his voice. "You think scaring us will change anything?" He spat, pointing a finger at Emily. "We are the Galactic Empire. We don't bow to threats." Emily looked at him sadly. "It's not about bowing," she said. "It's about understanding. If you refuse to see the harm you've caused, then yes, your empire will fall. But if you're willing to let go of fear and greed, there's a chance for something better." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Across the galaxy, people began to make choices. Some barricaded themselves inside their homes, hoping to ride out the storm. Others took to the streets, shouting for change. In space stations and starships, rebels and loyalists clashed, each side fighting for survival or dominance. As the first minute ticked away, Marcus realized one thing with chilling clarity. Emily Carter wasn't bluffing. Whatever she was, whatever power she wielded, it was real. And unless someone stopped her, the empire would crumble, starting with him. The countdown had begun, and the weight of Emily's words hung over the amphitheater like a storm cloud. 27 minutes. That was all the time left before the empire would collapse, according to her. Marcus Hale clenched his jaw, refusing to believe that his world could unravel so quickly. He barked orders at his soldiers, demanding they seize control of the situation, but his commands fell flat. The guards stood frozen, their weapons useless, their training meaningless in the face of something they couldn't comprehend. Emily floated above the platform, her glowing form steady and calm. She looked out at the crowd, her eyes soft but resolute. "You don't have to be afraid. she said, her voice carrying through the arena and into the ears of billions watching the broadcast. This isn't punishment. It's an opportunity. Let go of what holds you back. Choose unity instead of division. Her message sparked different reactions across the galaxy. In one corner of the Empire, a factory worker named Daniel Foster sat glued to his screen. He had spent years building machines for the Imperial War effort, never questioning where they were sent or who they harmed. But now, as he listened to Emily's words, doubt crept into his mind. What if everything he'd done had only made things worse? He glanced at the photo of his younger sister on the wall. She had disappeared years ago after speaking out against the Empire. Was this his chance to make things right? Elsewhere, aboard a damaged cruiser drifting near the edge of Imperial space, Rachel Bennett watched the broadcast from her cell. She was a former slave, captured during one of the Empire's brutal raids and forced to work in mining colonies until she escaped. Now imprisoned again for helping others flee, she felt no hope for the future, until Emily spoke. Her words stirred something deep inside Rachel, a flicker of belief that maybe, just maybe, change was possible. Back in the amphitheater, chaos continued to unfold. Some people screamed and ran for the exits, only to find them sealed shut. Others knelt on the ground, praying to any deity they could think of. A few tried to reason with Emily, shouting questions about what she wanted them to do. But she didn't answer directly. Instead, she closed her eyes briefly, as if listening to something far away. When she opened them again, her expression was firmer. "The choice is yours," she said. "Will you cling to fear and control, or will you embrace freedom and connection?" The anomaly won't wait forever. Marcus growled under his breath, frustration boiling over. He grabbed a nearby technician by the collar. "Fix this," he snarled. "Do whatever it takes." The technician stammered, shaking his head. "Sir, we've tried everything. The systems, they're not responding. It's like reality itself is breaking down." Reality. The word sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. For decades, he had believed in order, in structure, in the Empire's unshakable power. But now, staring at Emily and the impossible events surrounding her, he began to wonder. Had the Empire been built on lies all along? Had they pushed too far, taken too much, crushed too many lives in their quest for dominance? As the fourth minute ticked away, whispers of rebellion spread beyond the amphitheater. On distant planets, oppressed citizens rose up, inspired by Emily's call for unity. Imperial governors faced angry mobs, their authority crumbling. Soldiers deserted their posts, unsure whom to obey. Even loyalists began to question whether the Empire was worth saving. In orbit around the capital planet, fleets of starships reported system failures. Engines sputtered, weapons went offline, and communication channels dissolved into static. Commanders scrambled to regain control, but nothing worked. Panic rippled through the ranks as officers realized they were powerless against whatever force Emily represented. Meanwhile, Daniel made a decision. He couldn't sit idly by while the world changed around him. Grabbing a toolkit from his workshop, he headed toward the local resistance headquarters, determined to help however he could. If the Empire was falling, someone had to pick up the pieces. Rachel, too, found her resolve hardening. When a power surge caused the cruiser's cell doors to unlock, she seized the opportunity. Sneaking through the corridors, she freed other prisoners and rallied them to her side. Together, they vowed to fight, not for revenge, but for a better future. As the fifth minute passed, Emily remained serene, watching the galaxy awaken to its potential. She knew not everyone would choose wisely, but even small acts of courage could spark great change. And so, she waited, patient and unwavering, as the Empire teetered on the brink of collapse. 8 minutes into the countdown, the galaxy felt like it was holding its breath. The anomaly continued to spread, disrupting everything the Empire had built. Cities plunged into darkness as power grids failed. Starships drifted aimlessly in space, their crews stranded without communication or navigation systems. On planets far from the capital, entire populations watched the skies, wondering if they would survive the next hour or the next minute. In the amphitheater, Emily remained at the center of it all, her glowing form a beacon amidst the chaos. She seemed untouchable, almost serene, as though she existed outside the panic gripping everyone else. General Marcus Hale stood frozen, his mind racing but unable to settle on a plan. His soldiers were useless, his weapons ineffective. For the first time in his life, he felt truly powerless, and it terrified him. "What do you want from us?" Marcus finally shouted, his voice cracking under the strain. Emily turned her gaze toward him, her expression neither angry nor triumphant. "I don't want anything," she replied calmly. "This isn't about me. It's about you. All of you. You've been given a chance to start over, to build something better. But time is running out." Her words echoed through the amphitheater and across the galaxy. People listened, some with hope, others with fear. In a quiet corner of the capital city, an elderly man named Joseph sat alone in his small apartment, staring at the flickering broadcast on his screen. He had lived through decades of imperial rule, watching as freedoms disappeared and lives were crushed. Now, as he heard Emily speak of unity and connection, tears filled his eyes. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a future worth fighting for. Elsewhere, Daniel Foster and his team of resistance members worked quickly to disable a major communication hub. The facility loomed above them, its towering antennas once symbols of imperial control. Armed with crude tools and sheer determination, they managed to breach the outer walls. Inside, they found rows of humming machines that pulsed faintly with energy. One by one, they dismantled the systems, cutting off the flow of propaganda that had kept billions under the Empire's thumb. As they worked, Daniel couldn't shake the image of Emily floating above the platform. Her calm demeanor and unwavering resolve reminded him of his sister, someone who had always believed in doing what was right, no matter the cost. He clenched his fists, vowing not to let her sacrifice be in vain. Meanwhile, aboard the damaged cruiser, Rachel Bennett and her group reached the command center after a tense journey through the ship's corridors. Automated turrets fired sporadically, forcing them to dodge and weave, but they pressed on. When they finally entered the dimly lit room, Rachel immediately spotted the control panel for the weapons systems. Working together, they disabled the circuits, ensuring the cruiser could no longer be used as a tool of destruction. As the 9th minute ticked away, whispers of rebellion grew louder. On distant planets, oppressed citizens stormed imperial offices, tearing down statues of emperors and burning flags. Soldiers deserted their posts, unwilling to fight for a cause they no longer believed in. Even high-ranking officials began to defect, realizing the Empire's collapse was inevitable. Back in the amphitheater, Marcus realized he was standing alone. His loyalists had fled, too afraid to face whatever came next. He glanced at Emily, then at the crowd, searching for answers. Was this really the end? Could the Empire, the foundation of his entire life, be erased so completely? Emily's voice broke through his thoughts. "It doesn't have to end this way," she said gently. "But you have to choose. Will you cling to fear, or will you embrace change?" Marcus swallowed hard, his chest tightening. For the first time, he allowed himself to consider the possibility that he might have been wrong, that the Empire's strength wasn't real, but a fragile illusion propped up by lies and oppression. Across the galaxy, people made their choices. Some chose to fight for freedom. Others chose to hide. But one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same again. 10 minutes down, 17 to go. 11 minutes into the countdown, the galaxy seemed to teeter on the edge of a vast and unknowable abyss. The anomaly continued to ripple outward, dissolving the Empire's infrastructure piece by piece. Planets once tightly controlled by Imperial forces now found themselves adrift, their leaders either fleeing or surrendering. Starships that had once enforced the Empire's will were now powerless, floating like ghostly husks in the void of space. In the amphitheater, Emily remained calm, her glowing form steady as the chaos around her intensified. The crowd outside had grown restless, some shouting for answers, others simply waiting in stunned silence. General Marcus Hale stood motionless, his mind racing but unable to find a way out. He glanced at the soldiers who still lingered nearby, though their weapons hung useless at their sides. What could they do against something so incomprehensible? Emily's voice broke through the tension. "You've been given a gift," she said softly, her words carrying through the amphitheater and into the ears of billions. "A chance to start anew, but it's up to you to take it." Her message resonated differently with each person who heard it. For Daniel Foster, working tirelessly with the resistance, her words fueled his determination. He and his team had successfully disabled 2 communication hubs, cutting off vital channels the Empire used to maintain control. As they moved toward a third target, Daniel felt a flicker of hope, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Maybe, just maybe, the galaxy could heal from the wounds inflicted by centuries of oppression. On the damaged cruiser, Rachel Bennett and her group celebrated their success in disabling the ship's weapon systems, but their victory was short-lived. Alarms began blaring as the ship's core systems destabilized, likely due to the anomaly spreading across the galaxy. Rachel quickly realized they couldn't stay aboard much longer. She rallied the freed prisoners, organizing an escape plan. Using emergency pods scattered throughout the vessel, they launched themselves into space, hoping to reach a nearby planet before the cruiser broke apart completely. Meanwhile, back in the capital city, ordinary citizens faced difficult choices. Some banded together, forming impromptu communities to share resources and protect one another. Others hoarded supplies, fearing scarcity as the Empire's systems collapsed. In one neighborhood, Joseph, the elderly man who had watched the broadcast alone, joined a group of neighbors distributing food and water to those in need. Though frail, he worked tirelessly, driven by Emily's call for unity. For the first time in years, he felt part of something greater than himself. Back in the amphitheater, Marcus finally broke his silence. "If you're so powerful, why not just destroy us?" he demanded, his voice tinged with desperation. "Why give us this choice?" Emily looked at him, her expression gentle but firm. "Destruction isn't the answer," she replied. "True change comes when people choose it for themselves. I'm offering you a path forward, but it's your decision to take it." Marcus clenched his fists, frustration boiling over. He had spent his life believing in strength and order, yet here he was, stripped of both. Was Emily right? Had the Empire's foundation been built on lies? He glanced at the crowd, seeing fear, confusion, and even glimmers of hope in their eyes. Could he really let go of everything he had fought for? As the 12th minute passed, the anomaly grew stronger. Buildings in the capital city began to crumble, their foundations weakened by the shifting energy. Ships in orbit disintegrated, reduced to clouds of debris. Across the galaxy, entire sectors descended into chaos, but amid the destruction, small acts of courage began to shine through. People helped strangers, shared what little they had, and dreamed of a better future. Daniel and his team reached their third target, a massive data center storing decades of Imperial records. As they worked to dismantle the servers, Daniel thought about Emily's sacrifice. Whatever happened next, he vowed to honor her message by building something better. Rachel and the others landed safely on a nearby moon, watching as the cruiser exploded in a distant flash of light. Though battered and exhausted, they felt a sense of purpose. They weren't just survivors. They were pioneers, ready to forge a new path. 13 minutes down, 14 to go. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would rise from the ashes. 14 minutes into the countdown, the galaxy felt as though it were being reborn and torn apart, all at once. The anomaly pulsed with increasing intensity, reshaping reality itself. Cities crumbled, starships disintegrated, and entire planets transformed in ways no one could predict. In the amphitheater, Emily remained at the center of it all, her glowing form a stark contrast to the chaos around her. She floated silently, watching as humanity wrestled with its fate. General Marcus Hale stood frozen, his mind overwhelmed by the enormity of what was happening. He had always believed in control, in power, but now he realized how fragile those things truly were. His empire, the empire he had sworn to protect, was collapsing before his eyes, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. For the first time, doubt crept into his heart. Was this really the end? Or was there still a chance to salvage something from the wreckage? Emily's voice broke through the noise. "You've been given a choice," she said softly, her words resonating deeply with everyone listening. "Will you cling to fear, or will you embrace hope?" Her message reached far beyond the amphitheater. Across the galaxy, people made decisions that would shape their futures, and perhaps the future of humanity itself. Some chose to fight for survival, while others sought to rebuild what had been lost. On a distant moon, Rachel Bennett and the freed prisoners began organizing their new community. They scavenged materials from the damaged escape pods and started constructing shelters, determined to create something better than the empire they had escaped. Meanwhile, Daniel Foster and his team successfully disabled the third data center, erasing decades of Imperial records. As they worked, Daniel thought about Emily's words. She had spoken of unity and connection, ideas that seemed impossible under the Empire's rule. But now, standing among people who shared his vision of a brighter future, he felt a spark of hope. Together, they vowed to spread her message, traveling from planet to planet, to help others recover and rebuild. Back in the capital city, ordinary citizens faced their own struggles. Buildings continued to collapse, forcing people to flee their homes. Amid the destruction, acts of kindness emerged. Joseph, the elderly man who had once lived quietly in his apartment, now led a group of neighbors in distributing food and supplies. They worked tirelessly, helping anyone in need. Though exhausted, Joseph felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. For the first time, he understood what Emily meant by unity. It wasn't just an idea, it was action. In the amphitheater, Marcus finally spoke, his voice trembling. If we choose hope, what happens then?" he asked, his usual confidence replaced by uncertainty. Emily looked at him, her expression calm but firm. "The anomaly will stabilize," she replied. "But I must remain here, at its center, to maintain the balance." Marcus stared at her, realizing the depth of her sacrifice. She wasn't just offering humanity a second chance, she was giving up her own life to make it possible. A wave of guilt washed over him. All these years, he had served the Empire without question, never considering the lives it destroyed. Now, faced with the truth, he didn't know how to respond. As the 15th minute passed, the anomaly reached its peak. The air shimmered violently, and the ground beneath the amphitheater cracked open, revealing veins of glowing energy. People screamed and fled, but Emily remained steady, her light growing brighter. She raised her hands, and the chaos slowed, as though time itself were holding its breath. "Remember this moment," she said, her voice echoing across the galaxy. "This is your chance to begin again." Daniel and Rachel, though miles apart, both paused in their work, feeling the weight of her words. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they also knew they weren't alone. Across the stars, others shared their determination to build a better world. 16 minutes down, 11 to go. The galaxy waited, suspended between endings and beginnings, as Emily prepared to seal her promise. 17 minutes into the countdown, the galaxy seemed to pause, caught between destruction and rebirth. The anomaly pulsed with an almost unbearable intensity, its energy reshaping reality itself. In the amphitheater, Emily stood at the heart of it all, her glowing form brighter than ever. Her calm demeanor never wavered, even as the ground beneath her cracked and split, revealing swirling streams of light that seemed alive. General Marcus Hale watched in stunned silence, his mind struggling to process what was happening. He had spent his entire life serving the Empire, believing in its strength and superiority. But now, faced with Emily's unwavering resolve, He realized how hollow those beliefs had been. She wasn't just a prisoner or a rebel. She was something far greater, something beyond his understanding. And she was offering humanity a chance to start over. Emily turned her gaze toward the crowd, her voice soft but clear. "This is your moment," she said. "The Empire has fallen, but you can rise from its ashes. Choose wisely." Her words echoed through the amphitheater and across the galaxy, reaching billions of people. On distant planets, ordinary citizens began to act. Some worked together to rebuild their communities, sharing food and resources. Others searched for survivors, helping those trapped by collapsing buildings or stranded without power. Even in the face of chaos, small acts of kindness began to shine through. Rachel Bennett and her group on the moon continued their efforts to establish a new settlement. Using salvaged materials, they constructed makeshift shelters and organized teams to gather supplies. Though the work was hard, there was a sense of purpose among them, a shared belief that they were building something better than the world they had left behind. Rachel often thought of Emily's sacrifice, reminding herself and the others that their efforts mattered. Meanwhile, Daniel Foster and his team moved from one target to the next, dismantling Imperial infrastructure and spreading messages of hope. They traveled light, carrying only what they needed, but their impact was profound. Everywhere they went, they inspired others to join the cause. People who had once lived in fear now dared to dream of a future free from oppression. Daniel carried Emily's words in his heart, knowing that her courage had sparked this change. Back in the amphitheater, Marcus finally stepped forward, his usual arrogance replaced by humility. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily looked at him, her expression gentle but resolute. "You let go," she replied. "Let go of fear, of greed, of everything that held you back. Trust in each other and trust in yourselves." As the 18th minute passed, the anomaly reached its final phase. The air shimmered violently, and the ground beneath the amphitheater began to collapse entirely. Emily floated higher, her light growing so bright that it was almost impossible to look at her directly. The crowd fell silent, awestruck by the sight. "I must stay here," she said, her voice resonating deeply. "But you have the power to shape what comes next. Build a world where everyone belongs. A world where no one is left behind." Her words struck a chord with everyone listening. For Marcus, they were a call to redemption. For Daniel and Rachel, they were a reminder of why they fought. And for countless others, they were a beacon of hope in a time of uncertainty. As the 19th minute ticked away, Emily raised her hands one last time. The anomaly surged, enveloping the amphitheater in a blinding flash of light. When the light faded, the amphitheater was gone, and so was Emily. In its place stood a vast, shimmering field of energy, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Across the galaxy, the effects were immediate. Cities that had crumbled began to rebuild themselves, guided by the collective will of their inhabitants. Starships that had drifted aimlessly reactivated, their systems restored. Planets transformed, becoming havens of peace and cooperation. Daniel and Rachel, though separated by distance, both felt a deep sense of gratitude. They knew Emily's sacrifice had made this possible. Together with countless others, they vowed to honor her memory by continuing to build a better future. 20 minutes down, 7 to go. The galaxy held its breath, ready to embrace the dawn of a new era. As the 27th minute arrived, the galaxy exhaled, a collective breath of relief and uncertainty. The anomaly had stabilized, its pulsing energy now a steady glow that seemed to hum with life. What remained of the amphitheater was gone, replaced by an otherworldly field of light that stretched endlessly into the horizon. It was as though the universe itself had taken a step forward, leaving behind the scars of the Empire. In the aftermath, people across the galaxy began to pick up the pieces. Cities once ruled by fear were now filled with voices of hope. On distant planets, communities came together to rebuild, not just their homes, but their relationships with one another. Strangers became neighbors, and enemies sought reconciliation. The Empire's collapse had left a void, but humanity rushed to fill it with something better. Rachel Bennett stood on the moon where she and her group had landed, looking out at the makeshift settlement they had built. Tents made from salvaged materials dotted the landscape, and children played among them, laughing without a care. Rachel smiled faintly, remembering Emily's words about unity and connection. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she felt hopeful. Together with others, she worked tirelessly to ensure their new community thrived, sharing stories of resilience and courage to inspire those around her. Daniel Foster traveled from planet to planet, spreading Emily's message. He carried no weapons, only tools and supplies to help those in need. Wherever he went, he found people eager to listen, ordinary citizens tired of living in fear, ready to embrace change. Daniel spoke of Emily's sacrifice, reminding everyone that her choice had given them this chance. Slowly but surely, seeds of unity began to take root, sprouting into something beautiful. Back on the capital planet, General Marcus Hale wandered through the ruins of the empire he had once served. The towering structures that symbolized its power were reduced to rubble, their grandeur erased by the anomaly. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Though guilt still lingered, he couldn't undo the harm he had caused, but he could try to make amends. Joining a group of volunteers, he worked alongside former enemies, helping clear debris and distribute food. Each act of kindness felt like a small step toward redemption. Years passed, and Emily Carter's name became legend. Monuments were erected in her honor, not statues or plaques, but gardens, schools, and libraries named after her. Her story inspired generations, a reminder of how one person's courage could spark change across the stars. Some remembered her as a martyr. Others saw her as a savior. But all agreed that she had changed the course of history. On quiet nights, Daniel often thought about Emily. He wondered if she ever regretted staying behind, sacrificing herself to stabilize the anomaly. But when he looked up at the night sky, now brighter than ever before, he felt certain of one thing. She knew exactly what she was doing. The stars seemed closer somehow, as if inviting humanity to explore the infinite possibilities ahead. Rachel, too, carried Emily's memory with her. She told her story to anyone who would listen, ensuring that future generations understood the cost of freedom and the value of unity. Her settlement on the moon grew into a thriving colony, a testament to what could be achieved when people worked together. The galaxy moved forward, not as subjects of an empire, but as explorers of a vast and wondrous universe. Old wounds healed, and new dreams took flight. Humanity learned to coexist with nature, with technology, and most importantly, with each other. They were no longer bound by chains of fear or greed, but united by a shared vision of harmony. And so, the legacy of Emily Carter lived on, not in monuments or memorials, but in the hearts of those who dared to believe in a better world. Through her sacrifice, the galaxy found its way back to the light, proving that even in the darkest times, hope could shine brightest of all.